I can't underestimate the value of networking and talking to people and
Yeah.
getting face to face. And if you can only do it online, that's still fine. But people, I see so many students and so many people who are trying to break in the industry that spend 1% of their time on networking.
Hey guys, my name is Thomas Brush. I'm the creator of a game called Pinstripe. I'm also working on a game called Once Upon a Coma. I have an amazing guest today. He is Peet Cooper, and he has just an incredible career in the games industry and has learned a ton. And I think I just want to leave it to you, Pete, to sort of introduce yourself and give everybody an idea of what you've been through in this whole much longer career than I've had in the game industry so far.
Okay, cool. So I've been in the game industry for a little over 15 years now,
Wow.
mostly in the AAA space. I've worked on franchises like the 007, Call of Duty. I worked at Blizzard on World of Warcraft and Diablo 3. And most recently, I was an art director at Riot Games, working on League of Legends and multiple other games. And 9 months ago, I decided to focus on my nonprofit organization full time. So I run a company called Gamers for Good with my wife, and we create games and other opportunities for gamers to give back.
Wow. Like that's so impressive, and it's almost like you went from AAA and decided to sort of go a little bit more, I don't know, smaller scale, and almost like going with an indie approach to things. Um,
Yeah,
is
it's
it?
very indie right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I've noticed a lot of people in AAA tend to do that. They kind of move out of it and into a smaller scale sort of thing. So I'm just curious why, I guess, why you chose to sort of. It sounds like you escaped it or something. You mind clarifying there?
Well, I mean, there is a little bit of the escape there.
Yeah.
I've done it for quite a while now. And one of the things I've loved it the whole time, by the way.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was challenging is working on these huge, giant projects with hundreds of people at a time. It does wear on you.
Yeah.
It can
Yeah.
for some people. And for me, I really I wanted to. I've always loved indie games. I love all games. I have a massive game collection, and I've been into games my whole life. But I've basically wanted to try going a much more indie route,
Yeah.
and I also really wanted to focus on doing charity work because when I look at the impact that I've had in the AAA space, it's great, but at the same time, I don't feel like there's been enough opportunity to do good things
Yeah. Yeah.
um, from like a giving back and a charity standpoint.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I feel that way as well. Even in the game, like indie game industry side of things, I often wonder what's the point? Like, part of me thinks video games are terrible. Like, I just had a daughter, and I don't really want her to be obsessed with video games as a child, you know. And so you wonder, like, are you having a positive impact or a negative impact on kids and just people who play video games? So looking back, like when you were working at, let's say, Blizzard, did you mention the games and the various sort of, I guess, specifics of working on those games? What did you do specifically there?
well, I spent the majority of my time at Blizzard working on Diablo 3. I was on that team specifically,
Right.
and I was a senior environment artist.
Wow.
So I did the entire world pipeline from the initial ideation to the concept art to the modeling, texturing, kind of that whole pipeline
Okay.
with a really great team. That was an amazing learning process. Then I got to help out on World of Warcraft, Mist of Pandaria. And I got to do some early concept for Overwatch, which was Project Titan before it was known as Overwatch.
Okay.
and I was there for 5 years.
Wow. Okay. So can you say a little bit about like maybe what the company culture and the work environment is like there?
Yeah, I mean the culture is great. You know, it's the work environment is hyper casual,
Nice.
a little too casual in my opinion at times.
Yeah.
Where yeah, the just from a pace standpoint, it can be pretty slow and pretty. Uh,
Well, that makes sense
so
considering their
if you
launch
if you like
dates.
getting if you like getting stuff done quickly, it can be frustrating.
So in a
uh,
way, it's kind of like the reason their deadlines always shift. It's not because they're like making incredible games, even though they are. It's just because they take things really casually.
well, it's I wouldn't say it isn't quite because they're taking things casually. I'd say it's more so the fact that they're iterating a lot. You know, it
I
is
got you.
they're not rigid in regards to okay, we have to get this thing done. So here's the date and here it is. I'm sure there is more of that now because that was 6 years ago that I worked there.
Right.
But back then it was very much like okay, let's try this version of this. Okay, that could be cool, but here's a ton of feedback. Let's try a different version. Okay, that could be cool, but we can try something better. Okay, let's try that. Let's try that. There's a few things that we worked on uh, that version 2 or 3 were fine, and we went through 10 versions of. uh,
Man.
and I mean I think that's a lot of
Yeah.
the AAA space is it's pushing for that quality bar.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not.
Well, I can imagine it's
And
kind of scary, especially for like senior positions where they have to keep a budget in mind or they have to keep, who the team is and how many people they got working on this thing, how much they're investing in this kind of polish.
well,
And I just wondered,
yeah, I mean,
did that stress you out at the time?
no, that's not really a stress because I mean at Blizzard and Riot, the return is so massive that
Yeah.
we try to be efficient. I try to make sure we're staying on top of stuff
Yeah.
and not and prioritizing how this actually fits into the game
Yeah.
versus it just being a cool art piece or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like ways of reusing things and like there is a lot of efficiency happening,
Yeah.
but there's very rarely a budgetary concern at either of those studios just because they make an absurd amount of money
That's crazy to think because I thought it would be
selling.
like the opposite. Because like when you're an indie game developer and you've probably felt this, you assume it's going to be this really sort of chill, exciting, doing whatever you want feeling. But I know for me, like I think about the budget and the time and how much effort I'm putting into something way more than I thought I would.
Yeah, it's
Because you
yeah
have
for
no
sure
idea
because
what your ROI is going to be, you know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, Blizzard and Riot and AAA studios have these giant marketing teams that is just their job to make sure it gets in the hands of millions of people
Yeah.
like immediately.
Yeah.
Uh, so the sales on Blizzard content is all but guaranteed
Well, something
because
that
they have such a massive following, and I mean the quality level is
oh, it's
phenomenal.
incredible.
So
It's
it's
incredible.
always great.
And I wish that I had that
Yeah.
kind of bravery. And sometimes I have. Like when I was working on Pinstripe, I really focused on polish, and I made it a priority to polish the game. But I know that I was always sort of nervous and a little bit anxious about taking it too far and never releasing the thing. So I think that that's a really cool thing that Blizzard does. It almost takes it, even though maybe they know they're going to make a ton of money. I'm sure it takes some balls on their end to actually, spend a lot of time and risk maybe, how Blizzard is always getting bad press about, or like when they're about to release a game, they might get bad press about how they're taking forever to finish it. And so they are risking something.
Yeah, it's at this point it's just the expectation though of
Yeah.
the company
Yeah.
is it's done when it's done.
Yeah.
It's done when it's ready. It's
Right.
it's done when we feel like it is the best product it
Right.
can be.
Well,
So
to contrast, you as an indie developer or somebody who's working more in that indie space, I know that you also you did an Undertale art book, or at
mhm.
least you helped manage that, which I know a ton of the people A ton of my listeners are probably huge Undertale fans. Can you elaborate a little bit on that project?
Yeah, that was a cool project. So we reached out to Toby
Yeah.
Fox, the creator, and told him about our charity, and told him about the previous art book that we made. And we said we just want to make a fan art book that goes to supporting some mental health awareness companies,
Yeah.
nonprofit organizations. And we just kind of put out a call to action to DeviantArt and ArtStation and a bunch of our artist friends, and just asking for Undertale fan art submissions.
Nice.
And we got a massive amount.
I
We had
bet.
over 1,000 submissions
Yeah.
from I think we have close to 300 artists in the book,
Man.
and it was great. It was I was kind of blown away
Yeah.
by the reception,
So
um,
compared to
and
like,
we were able to.
go ahead.
Oh, and I was just gonna say, like we did a Kickstarter for it,
Hmm.
and we were able to raise $60,000 plus something for the charities. So that
Yeah.
was really great.
Yeah. So like compared to your previous career path of working at Riot and Blizzard, what was doing something like this? What did it feel like?
Oh, it felt amazing, because it felt like, and a lot of what we're doing right now with Gamers for Good is just like, uh, it's kind of like something that's completely new and
Yeah.
different, and everything I'm doing now, I'm having to learn and challenge myself. And the primary reason I ended up leaving Blizzard, is because I felt like I was stagnating.
Yeah.
I felt like people, when I was going to leave Blizzard to go to Riot, a lot of people were like, you're crazy, you're leaving Blizzard, the best company,
Yeah.
all this stuff, for this kind of like smaller, almost startup-y feeling company,
Yeah.
at the time. And this was 6.5 years ago, as League of Legends was kind of like ramping in popularity. Um, but it was really like I knew everyone that I wanted to know at Blizzard. Like I knew lots of people on the WoW team and the Overwatch team and all the Diablo people, um and I just kind of felt like, okay, cool, I've been here for 5 years. It's kind of time to move on. I'm not a person who's going to stagnate, um, or just kind of stay at the same place working with the same people. I want to keep kind of evolving and growing and learning new stuff every day and meeting
Yeah.
new people.
Well,
Uh,
I think a lot of our listeners would probably think, man, if I was at Blizzard, like I would stick around for a long time. But I,
sure, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome for
But I
most
think
people.
it's a crazy thing to when you're first starting in the industry, and you probably remember this feeling of thinking, I'll never get there. I'll never get to be maybe release my own game on Xbox or Nintendo Switch, or I'll never be able to work at Blizzard. It's this crazy high dream, but it sounds like the way you saw it was maybe you knew your potential and you knew what you could do, or at least you wanted to challenge yourself. And
Yeah, for me, I've always had a lot of confidence and drive and work ethic. So
yeah,
I knew, that anything I want in life, I can get if I'm willing to work for it.
yeah, yeah,
So with that mentality, I got my first job. Um, I did amazingly well at school, and then actually got recruited. I never actually applied at Blizzard.
wow,
They recruited me.
wow. Was it based on your
Um,
portfolio?
yeah,
Yeah,
it was just based on stuff I was throwing up on websites,
yeah,
DeviantArt, and
yeah.
different stuff.
So, how important, like, what's like the number one trait do you think for someone who wants to work maybe at a place like Blizzard or Riot? Like, I mean, obviously it depends on, so talent aside and skill sets aside, you mentioned hard work and confidence. How important are those things in getting into the game industry?
Uh, I don't think confidence is hyper important,
Hmm.
because I know a lot of people who are amazing and have major lack of confidence, and they have kind of forever.
Yeah.
And they just their passion and drive gets them through.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say passion
Okay.
is paramount.
Right.
Like it's like that's something you can't teach. You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like you have it or you don't, and if you don't, find it.
Yeah. Well, is it
Um,
passion for games or is it passion for the specific game that they want to work on? You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, I think it's passion for games.
Yeah.
I think if you're super passionate, it's incredibly rare for someone to just on their first job, I'm gonna go work at my dream job and my dream game.
Yeah.
So if you're like long-term goal is to work on Mass Effect at BioWare or something,
Yeah.
and that's the one game you're passionate about,
Yeah.
it's gonna be pretty tough for you to get jobs other places because
Well, I
they're
mean,
not
for
making
you though,
Mass
you
Effect.
you start didn't you start on like Diablo? Like that was your first game?
No. I
Okay.
started a company called
Oh,
Nspace,
okay.
where we were working on weird little prototypes. The first game I shipped was a game called Geist on GameCube.
I think I remember
Um,
that.
it- yeah,
Yeah.
in 2003, I think is when I was working on that.
Okay.
And I went there. I actually had a few different job offers at a school. I went there because Shigeru Miyamoto was actually like one of the producers on it or something because it was published by Nintendo. So when they were telling me about the game, they were telling me that they were constantly getting feedback from him, and
Nice.
and for me, it was like as a young person growing up in the Nintendo era,
Hmm.
just even the idea of
Dude.
working on the game that he's even playing is like I was like, yeah, I want to work on that. Like I don't
Yes.
really care
Yes.
about anything else. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, dude.
Because I knew it was going to also be weird as hell, right?
Right,
Because
exactly.
you know,
Coming in contact with industry legends is, for me, it's one of the highlights of just making games. And I haven't come in contact with him, but I've had the pleasure of being able to meet a lot of people in the game industry, YouTubers, and also just people who have made like really successful indie games like Meat Boy, and stuff like that. So, I think a good question is, have you ever specifically made an effort to reach out to people who are successful and try and understand them? I know you did that with Toby Fox, but that was mainly just to get his approval to work on a project. But I wonder if you seem to have just brushed shoulders with so many amazing people. And I'm just wondering how you pulled that off. Was it luck or were you very intentional about it?
oh no, it's hyper intentional. Like I put myself out there
Okay.
all the time. I've been to GDC 11 times,
Wow.
and GDC is the for anyone who doesn't know, that's the Game Developers
Hmm.
Conference in San Francisco every year,
Yeah.
and that is like uh, the who's who, all the major players from all the big companies are there
Right.
every year. So giving talks and just networking and like the amount of amazing people I've met through GDC has been fantastic.
Okay.
Like I go to a lot of the round tables there to meet people, to meet peers in the same thing I do.
Right.
I've given talks there.
No way.
Um,
That's awesome,
so
man.
yeah, GDC is like if you have an opportunity, if you want to work in the game industry and you have an opportunity to go to
Yeah.
GDC, I highly suggest you do that. I wouldn't suggest doing it if you're super introverted because it
I
is
know.
expensive,
I
and if you're
know.
not willing to like stick your neck out and talk to people, you probably will waste your
Well,
money.
here's what I want to say is
Um,
the first GDC I attended, I was 18 years old. I think it was GDC. Yeah. Or, yeah, it was GDC. That's right. And there's South by Southwest as well, and I attended that one the next year, and those were both in Austin, Texas. But I was super introverted at my first GDC, and I was showcasing my game. Somehow I got really lucky enough to showcase this Flash game I made. And I got to say, like, just putting myself out there, even though I was terrified, it's like, jumping off of a cliff, that sort of feeling. But once you get over that feeling of falling, and you can sort of stabilize and you sort of get into this mentality of, okay, I got to talk to people. It's amazing how much you grow. So I would just say that, like, even though a lot of our listeners are I think most of our listeners are probably introverted. I've seen that trend with like the gamers tend to be introverted. I think I could be wrong, but I don't know. Like, even though you are introverted, this is the way into the industry. And so, love it or hate it, you've got to make that step and you've got to confidently pursue it. And so, I know you mentioned that you're a very confident person. And I'm a very confident person now, but like 6 or 7 years ago, actually 10 years ago, now that I'm looking at it, I was not. But the reason I'm confident now is I think because I took that step. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And one of the things about confidence, when I say I'm confident, I don't mean I think I know everything.
Right.
Because why I'm confident is because I'm totally okay with being the dumbest person in the room. I'm
Yeah.
completely okay with being like, I don't have any idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Who can help me?
Yeah.
And I'll say that to strangers. I'll say that to anybody.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's almost
and
inverted. Like the more humble you are, the more confident you'll become.
yeah, I mean that's worked for me
Yeah.
because
Wow.
it's really just kind of paid off. Like
Yeah.
whenever I'm in a meeting or a group setting or anything, and I feel like there's people who aren't understanding the speaker or aren't understanding something, even if I understand it, I'll raise my hand and say, hey, I don't think this is super clear. I see a bunch of confused faces around,
Yeah.
and I'll go ahead and you know draw the short straw and say, hey, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
Uh,
So it's kind of
I,
benefited you even in the AAA industry because like I've never even stepped foot in a AAA company. I have no idea what it's like, but I can imagine if I did, I'd be extremely like fish out of water, nervous, shouldn't speak up, just do as I'm told, and get the work done. Stay till what 3 a.m., 4 a.m., get the work done, and don't say a word. But you're saying that if you're willing to put yourself out there and confidently be humble, which sounds like a paradox, but confidently be humble, then the workers around you, you'll gain their respect because they're probably feeling the exact same way.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it right there.
Yeah. Wow.
It's it's also just understanding that everyone around, whether you're in a big studio, small studio, everyone has the same goal. We're all trying to deliver
Yeah.
a cool thing to players.
Yeah.
So, it's actually rare that you have the people who are like out to get you or have weird motivations.
Right.
Most of the time it's just like we're all just trying to make a great thing.
Right.
So
So
yeah.
something I got to be honest, Pete. Like I've often steered people away from AAA, even though I don't really have any right to do so because I've never been in it. I just know how fun it is to be an indie developer. Would you recommend to our listeners to pursue that route at some point in their career and see what it's like?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
I think everyone should try doing AAA. Everyone should try doing indie.
Yeah.
Everyone should try just doing a wide range of things because it's all about learning.
Right.
Like the difference between I don't have a ton of experience with indie other than I've studied indie games and I'm doing indie games now.
Yeah.
Um, the major difference is in AAA, you're going to meet and work with people who are unbelievably phenomenal at the one thing they do.
Interesting.
Because when you're working on a team of 50 people, you're going to be working with one person who is unbelievably good at sculpting tanks. It might be the best tank sculptor in
Like
the
that's their
world.
job title, tank
Um,
sculptor, basically.
yeah, like whatever. Yeah, whatever it is they do, and the larger the team,
Yeah.
the more specialized people are,
Wow.
and the better they are at individual things.
Wow.
So if you want to learn about animation, you know, go to a AAA studio and there could be someone who is specifically a creature animator,
Yeah.
and that's all they do
Yeah.
is animate dragons and wolves and quadrupeds,
Yeah.
and they're going to know more about the anatomy and the way things move and the muscle structure and the weight of things. They're going to have unbelievable amounts of knowledge on the
Yeah.
one specific thing that they do.
Yeah.
So that's hyper valuable.
Yeah.
And on the other end, the indie spectrum, it's like you're going to meet these amazing jacks of all trades, like yourself,
Yeah.
who have a incredible understanding of all the things, which and how they, and in many cases, they're not going to indie people aren't going to be the best at any one
Right.
thing,
That's
but they're going to
absolutely
have an
true.
amazing understanding of how each of the pieces are interconnecting and
S-
the relationship that they have with each other.
So
So
I've often
I think
wondered.
it's
Go ahead.
hyper. I was just going to say, so I think it's hyper valuable
Yeah.
to do both things.
Yeah.
I would highly suggest starting if you can
Hmm.
in the AAA space
Yeah.
over the indie space,
Yeah. Is that
because
particular like?
you'll just be less overwhelmed. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking like for me, I've like again, I've never stepped into AAA, and I'm wondering, okay, if for some reason Atmos Games, my studio tanked, and I had to go find a job, uh, what would someone like me do? You know, because like, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners feel the same way, who are working, they decided to drop out of college or something, and just work on indie games. What do you do? What do you like?
Well,
Who do
for
you
you,
become? Like, is it more of a generalist, so like art direction, or do you just swallow, swallow your pride and focus on foliage? You know, like what do you do?
yeah, it depends on what you want to do. It depends on what you're passionate
Yeah,
about. It depends on your strengths and
yeah,
weaknesses, and it depends on your life goals.
gotcha.
If it's like I just need to get into the industry,
Yeah,
I need to get a job, I need to pay my student loans. Uh, it's focus on what you're best at.
okay,
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that I see that are like, I want to be a character concept artist, and it's like, well, that is like the most sought after job that has more competition, and maybe 1 in 1,000 students
yeah.
will get an entry level job being a character concept
And you've
artist.
got to be
It's
like the
so,
best, right?
yeah, it's like, just don't even do that. Like, if you if you are amazing at making simple in-game 3D props, if you can get good at that, if you can get good at following a concept,
Yeah,
and executing on it well, you can get a job.
gotcha.
And the foot in the door is the hardest step. It's once you're in the industry, networking becomes much easier.
Yeah,
Um, uh, Trying to transition to something else becomes easier,
right.
because once you ship titles, once you have an actual proof that I can make and ship content, then life becomes easier,
Gotcha.
for sure. It's just that foot in the door that's so hard to get.
Right. So that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, um, like when you're talking about getting your foot in the door. I know you mentioned GDC, and like various trade shows and stuff. A lot of people, especially students, they can't afford a damn thing.
Mhm.
Especially like tickets to fly out to a city, and then also, pay for hotels. Like the hotel rates are crazy when you're attending these events.
Mhm.
How do they afford this, or do they? I mean, do they go in debt to do this? Do they you put it on their credit card? Like, how do they make it happen? You know, I know that might be
Yeah,
a weird.
any
Might be a weird question, but
well, I mean, it's any way you can. I
yeah.
mean, that's really what it comes down to.
So is it
It's
worth
how bad do you
foregoing?
want it.
Yeah, is it worth like really like limiting your budget as a student and just saying, you know what, I'm not going to spend this much on eating out, or I'm not going to spend this much on travel or gas money, and just start saving to go to these events? I mean, are they that important to go to?
Yes, networking, who you know, is, I would say, 50% of the industry.
Wow.
It's 50% how good you are, your skills, what just your ability,
Yeah.
and then the other 50% is who you know. Because
Yeah.
every job that I know that's filled, the first thing that happens is someone asks the office, "Hey, we need a new X. Who do you know?"
Right.
Um, so it's who do you know? Who have you talked to? Hey, did you meet? Like, I go to GDC every year. I do a lot of like student mentoring and
Hmm.
portfolio reviews and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And the recruiters will come to me and say, "Hey, who did you meet at GDC? Did you see any great students? Did you see any potential prospects?"
Yeah.
So that's always, getting out there, getting FaceTime with
Right.
people, networking is just huge. It's so valuable.
Well, let's just
And if you can't afford shows, I mean, if you're an artist, get your stuff on ArtStation, on DeviantArt.
Yeah.
Do the contests. I just judged an ArtStation contest a month ago.
Right.
It was a Wild West contest, and the amount of people who have visibility on these contests, it's like all the major studio artists, art directors, lead artists, and everybody is looking at these contests.
Right.
So yeah, just do them.
Yeah. So what I noticed is I didn't really have any intention to go to GDC, South by Southwest, PAX, E3, any of those things. I never had the intention to do that. I just wanted to make games. But what I found was the more you submit your content to various portals and stuff like that, you'll get potentially people to reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to be a part of this? Like sometimes PAX will reach out and say, hey, do you want to have a booth or whatever? And then you can like pay a couple grand to get a booth. But all I'm saying is putting your, like, kind of like what you're saying, is putting your content out there, just putting it online will probably lead you to go to these events even if you don't want to, because this is sort of where I guess the rubber meets the road. If your content is of quality, then you'll end up at these events. I know that for me, I was lucky enough to have one person reached out to me on newgrounds.com. I released my game on Newgrounds in 2008 or 2009. And one guy from a publisher reached out to me, said, hey, we'd love to publish your game and we'd like to fly you out to GDC. And for me, that was the start. That started everything, And it was all because I just put my stuff online.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But on the other side, it's you have a talent level that is far beyond the 99% of humans.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I don't believe that, but thank you.
Well, I've met thousands of people in this industry,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of people who can do all the things
All
in a
the
game
things.
as well as you can.
Yeah. Well, it's becoming more and more necessary
so-
for indie game developers, I think. But at the same time, that I should have been able to. Part of the reason why I've been sort of being a jack of all trades is because I was too afraid to find people of common interest and work with them. I was a little timid about trusting people with my work for so many years. And I think that's partly because I didn't really involve myself in a gaming community. I ignored the fact that there were gaming communities all around me, and I just didn't want to be a part because I was pretty shy. And that's partly has to do with my next question, which is related to being part of a community, especially maybe a student community. Do you have any opinions about gaming school and if that's valuable in getting into the industry?
Yeah. Communities are massive. That's part of networking. If you're at a school, one of the things I tell all students, if you're at a school, it's very easy to tell who the best students are.
Wow.
Right? Like you turn a few projects and oh, okay, Steve over there is by far the best animator in this class.
Yeah.
Okay. If you get to know Steve, guess what? Steve is going to have a job, probably immediately. So if you get to know and you hang out with the best people in your school, you're going to have a network of people who are going to have jobs.
So you're saying cozy up to the most talented students?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For sure.
That's such good advice. I've never even
thought
about that.
You'll also get better yourself,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you go out and play basketball or anything you do and you play with people who are worse than you, sure, you're going to feel good because you're dominating. But if you go out and play with people who are better than you at anything you do, you're going to get better because their skills are going to rub off on you.
So here's kind of a blunt question. Is, I don't know, $40,000 worth of student loans, worth it to go to school to become a game designer?
That's always a really, really tough question.
Yeah, because that's, to be honest, dude, that's what all these students are thinking. Is it worth the loans to get, or can I get in the industry without it?
You can absolutely get in the industry without it.
Okay.
I mean,
is that more so than most industries? I know that's kind of
I think it depends. I think it depends on your skill set and what you already know and what you're and also how good you are at learning. Like there's different people who are great at learning in video tutorial form, and then
Yes.
there's other people who need face-to-face mentoring.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of nuance in that question.
Hmm.
Um, and it's also like the introverted thing. The more shy you are in school, the more challenging it'll be for you to
Right.
network well and to get all the value out of school.
Yeah.
Because if you're asking me, is it worth 40K to do an online school? I would say never.
Right. Because you're not getting
Is
that
it worth?
that connection or the networking probably.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you're able to be in a class with 100 students, and you have that networking potential, and you have that feedback loop,
Yeah.
and you have that, you have those team projects where you're learning to work
Right.
collaboratively with people on game stuff, then the potential value it goes up dramatically.
Hmm.
But it's if it's literally I just need to learn how to technically make a game, like I
Yeah.
know I need to learn how to use Maya or Photoshop or any of the tools,
YouTube.
that's not worth. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Like today I would say hell no, that's not worth it at all. I mean, you can
Yeah.
pay $100 on Udemy and get enough tutorials to
Yeah.
cover anything you're going to learn in a college
Right.
for game development.
Well, something that I feel maybe confused about after just sort of talking with you is I'm wondering if I've been so lucky in the way, like, I'll reach, instead of like networking at like events or networking at schools. My networking has always consisted of sending my portfolio to just random people I respect and then asking them to mentor me. And I'm just wondering if perhaps that's not necessarily going to work for every single person. Like, if you have a really great portfolio, and like for the last 4 years, my portfolio has been pretty good because I would always send Pinstripe. I'd send a trailer of Pinstripe and tell them the work that I did on it. And I think that they really liked the project. But I'm wondering, like, if someone reaches out to you, for example, and wants to be mentored by you, do you have the kind of time to give effort to somebody who maybe might not have a great portfolio yet? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
I Yeah, totally. I 100% get it.
Okay.
And I think what you're hitting on is insanely valuable. Like, I
Okay.
think that's something everybody should be doing.
Okay. Even if their
Um,
portfolio kind of sucks.
Now, the thing is, where people fail here is when they spam and cold call style, where you're just kind of, okay, here's 150 people that I think have cool art. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna spam them with my portfolio.
Right.
That is, you're not gonna get. It's very unlikely you're gonna get any reply to that.
Okay.
But if you actually, so the thing about artists, and just a lot of developers, they have egos and they like to have their ego stroked. So that's just a reality.
Yeah.
We all like to have someone acknowledge our stuff. So if you
Yeah.
reach out to someone, make sure it's someone specific and you know their work.
Right.
So if someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I hear you give amazing advice. I really suck at this thing
Yeah.
that I know you're really good at
Yeah.
because I saw it on these three images. Like, I have specific things that
Yeah.
I know about the person I'm reaching out to.
Yeah.
I know their work and I know they're good at the thing I'm asking for advice
Yeah.
on." Then you're about 1,000,000% more likely to get a reply
Yeah, you know what's
than.
strange, Pete, is like when someone emails me and strokes my ego, I know exactly what they're doing. I totally, like, I know they're stroking my ego, but you're right, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you just want to, it feels good and you want to help somebody who's stroking your ego. And that's just me being completely transparent, completely honest.
Totally. It
And I
also is
always
just
feel
proof that they know who you are,
exactly,
right? It's
exactly. And like, I always feel guilty when I send someone an email and I'm like, this sentence is maybe a little bit manipulative or a little bit stroking their ego. But what I've learned is it's kind of okay to do that because, frankly, everyone enjoys that. For the most
Yeah,
part,
absolutely, and especially artists,
Oh,
right?
I know,
Like,
right? They're
I've hired so many
egotistical.
artists, right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to be an artist, you kind of have to
Yeah.
have a bit of that ego issue because
Yeah.
you're doing a solo thing by yourself.
Right.
uh, just drawing or modeling or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And another thing is artists have uh, a lot of concerns with their work. Like
Yeah.
we never love what we're doing when we're doing it. It's always like we need other people to tell us constantly that no, this is really good. This is great. Because when you work on something for 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever it is, you're like, I don't even know if this looks good at all. Like I've just kind of lost track of it.
Yeah.
So artists are constantly beating themselves up. And when they get an email and someone's just telling them, "Oh, I love this thing that you did,"
Yeah.
then it's like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah. Well,
That's
I've been looking at your artwork, and I can't disclose the project at all, but you helped me work on something related to Pinstripe earlier last year. And by the way, thank you so much. Like, it's so strange that you decided to do that essentially for free, even though, we're going to work out maybe me doing some music for you. But you were just very generous with your time, and you seem to have this level of confidence about your work that I think a lot of artists need to learn. They need to learn how to be confident in their work, because maybe when you were younger, did you feel like your work wasn't good enough and maybe you
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah. I
quit?
mean, I feel like and I don't feel like I did that for free, by the way. I feel like I got the better end of the deal. You're such an amazing
Well,
musician.
you still
Like
you
you're
still have to cash in on that deal, and I'm wondering if
I
you
do,
will.
I do. I'm holding off. I know what's got something coming down the pipe. But
Okay, good.
yeah, I mean, I still feel like that today. Like I look at my work every day and I'm just like, I need someone else to look at it and tell me whether
Yeah.
it's good or bad.
Right.
I'm very good at uh, I'm very good at assessing what someone else needs to do to improve their work,
Gotcha.
but I'm actually pretty terrible at doing that to myself.
Gotcha.
Because as I work on it, I kind of just lose the initial sketch I always love, the initial idea I always love before I get into it.
Right.
And then as I work on it, I kind of mold it in different directions, and then I'm just like, I don't even know if the original essence is even here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's plenty of things I'm terrible at. Like I know a lot of people who are great at the things I'm bad at, and there's things that I'm really good at, and they ask me for advice on that.
Right. And that's, I guess,
So
that's where networking and maybe perhaps extroversion, or maybe pretending to be an extrovert, is really valuable, because if you lack something in the game industry that you're not very good at, it's very important to be able to know people who can fulfill that for you, especially if you're running an indie studio.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Anytime, I would say, especially just anytime. Like
Yeah.
we all need feedback constantly. Like I've been a professional artist for over 20 years, and I still need feedback on basically everything I do.
Yeah, so that brings me to
From
a question I've been wanting to ask you since I met you, which is, your style is very Blizzard. At least when you were working at Blizzard, the artwork I looked at was very Blizzard-esque. And I want to know, like, I don't know how old you are or anything, but I'm 28 years old, and I remember when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I would just pore over the artwork in the StarCraft manuals and just look at all of the amazing artwork. And I'm wondering, did you do that when you were younger?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Like
there was this artist named
I,
Samwise. I think it's Samwise.
yeah, yeah,
Incredible
yeah,
artwork,
Sammy.
and I would try and copy it. And I'm just wondering, did you do that?
Yes. I got some advice. I got some amazing advice at Comic-Con when I was 13 or 14. Um, and it was take I feel bad because I don't even remember who the artist
Yeah.
was, but I was just looking at their stuff at their booth, and he told me just take a comic that you really like and draw the entire thing just as you see it.
Yep.
And then do that in another comic that's a completely different style.
Wow.
And I did that, and I had an issue of Iron Man, and I started on the first panel on the first page, and I went through and redrew the entire comic from front to back.
Yeah.
Um, and then I did that again with a Spider-Man issue, one of the old Todd McFarlane books. And in that time, I probably improved 500%.
A lot of
In
artists feel really
in
like guilty about that because they're copying. They're straight up copying somebody. I know that I would always avoid that. I always avoided copying people, and then I just was like, it's not like I'm actually putting this online. I just want to see if I can do it, you know?
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, we have this. I keep hearing people about reference. I don't use reference, or I don't use I don't copy other people. I
Yeah.
don't do all that. But I mean, all the great masters, they all did studies. All the great artists I know
Yeah.
today, they do studies. They take screenshots of movies. They take images of other artists,
Yeah.
and they try to replicate what they're doing. I
Right.
mean, they even post it online. They say, "Hey, I'm doing this study of this awesome
Yeah.
artist because I want to get better. I want to not pigeonhole myself into my own personal style. I want to have
Exactly.
enough visual vocabulary to where I can, get break out of that mold."
Yeah, and do you think you can
And
extend that? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
What were
do
you
you
saying?
do you think that you can extend that mentality to any sort of branch of the gaming industry? So like music or modeling or programming, basically looking at
Ab-
things that inspire you and seeing if you can do identically, like copying
yeah,
straight what it is you appreciate.
absolutely. I think you could do that for no matter what it is that you're doing. I
Gotcha.
think I think replicating uh, people who you look up to, or just replicating something that looks challenging that you would never consider doing yourself.
Gotcha.
One of the things I learned there, doing like just copying stuff, is, you know, we all have very specific ways we like doing things. So getting out of your comfort zone and doing things like, I drew poses like I would never do a pose. Uh, and it's like, okay, I learned something from
Yeah.
this because, I would never naturally default to this angle. Like I know a lot of people who don't do that, who don't use a lot of reference, who don't do studies, who don't do life drawing, and you can tell because they have a tendency to end up with a very rigid
Yeah.
style and a very rigid thematic design sense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, these are the only color schemes I use, these are the only shapes I
Yeah.
use, this is the only type of content I make.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine for someone like yourself. I would say you have kind of a rigid space
Yep.
about you, but you're well established, incredibly skilled, and you can make your own stuff without having to worry about it. But for someone who's trying to break into the industry,
Yeah.
um, the more rigid you are, the more limited you are in your job opportunities.
Right, right. Yeah, I remember when we were working on some pinstripe artwork with each other. I sent you a photo of like a train in Harry Potter or something, and we could cut this from the podcast if you want. But you just said, I'll just draw over that. So you just sort of drew over the perspective and used something that was inspiring to me as reference for this other image. And
Yeah.
how common
It
is
was
that in the industry that someone just Googles something?
incredibly common. Yeah, incredibly common. Like, if you can find a camera angle that you like, and you can find, like, I mean, so much of concept art now is just photo bashing,
Wow.
which is basically you take existing photos and reference,
Yeah.
and kind of take pieces of it, shove it together, and then paint over it to get the mood and the theme and everything, and
Right.
the silhouettes that you want.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's like everything I make. If I'm doing some kind of unique angle, I start with a model. I know a lot of concept artists who are like, oh, I don't want to learn any 3D because I want to be able to do perspective perfectly on my own, and that to me is really odd and silly.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you can use any basic 3D program, you never have to get good at perspective. Because
You could just trace over something
it
that you
takes
modeled.
it takes years and years to get good at perspective. You can literally just make a bunch of cubes, turn the camera to wherever you want, and then draw over that.
So what
You have your perspective in 5 minutes.
What's your
no matter
workflow
what
there?
angle you want, no matter what basic shapes you want. It's another tool, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like saying I don't want to use a pencil. I'd rather, like, it's just a tool. 3D is
Yeah.
a tool.
Yeah.
Use it.
Yeah. So
Use whatever tools you got.
what are those tools? Like, what's the workflow for you?
Oh, it depends on what I'm doing.
Okay.
And the workflow today is ask everybody else what they do and try to find what works.
Dude, that's the
Because like
common
right
theme.
now,
The common theme with this podcast I'm hearing is like humility is huge if you're going to work in the game industry. Just be willing to always ask, be willing to always just admit to yourself you don't know a damn thing. So just like go ask people what they do. I love that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even if you do know something, there's someone who knows it better than you. Like I guarantee it, no matter what it is you're doing,
Yeah.
someone is better than you, and you can ask them.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, they don't answer,
Right.
but
But
best case scenario, they do.
most people want to hear questions. Like I love it when someone asks me a question because behind the layer of the question is like if you peel back the layers of it, it's I respect you, right?
Yeah,
And that's what people want to hear.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think we're almost at an hour, Pete.
Okay.
I think I want to let's see here. I want to close really quick before we close out and go on to the bonus section, which is on Patreon. I want to know about Gamers for Good and like specifically like because I've always wondered like how does it work and is it your full-time job now? Are you full-time managing this thing? There's just a ton of questions I have about it. Do you want to just sort of rant about it for a bit?
Sure, I can try because yeah. So Gamers for Good it's a nonprofit organization, and our mission is creating opportunities for gamers to give back. So we're currently making indie games, art books, and just we do a lot of community service events. We just did one in Austin. We had one in New York a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
We do them in LA every month, in Portland, and we're trying to expand by just finding gamers who want to kind of open chapters in their area, and we'll help them find community service opportunities.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to get gamers to be more aware of charity in general and ways of giving back.
Yeah.
So like right now we're doing indie games, and we're trying to create examples of charity-based indie games and how people can insert charity into their games
Gotcha.
easily. And it's just a massive learning opportunity because we don't have a lot of examples of this.
Yeah.
We're just figuring it out as we go.
Yeah. So it's such an interesting thing. So it kind of is related to maybe running an indie game studio. Like, do you have like a big studio that you're working at with employees, or are you kind of working with people all over the world remotely?
Yeah, I'm just right now. It's just me and my wife here. She runs all the logistics of it, and then we work with different people. Right now, we're just working on a pro bono style where, like, we're working on a project right now that's gonna be on Steam in I think 2 weeks. Actually, less than 2 weeks. A new game called Food Drive. It's gonna be early access
Sweet.
on September 28th on Steam.
Sweet. Now, with games like Food Drive, this is a really bad, like, I feel awful asking this question, but I guess it's relevant to more companies that are, interested in profit. But do you think it's profitable for a regular indie studio to include charity in just a regular game that they're making? So
Absolutely. I think it's highly beneficial.
Okay.
I think it broadens your spectrum. I think it broadens your appeal. I think if every indie game added a little 99-cent DLC thing, like even if it's just like a Gamers for Good t-shirt or some charity that you appreciate. Like if you make a game that is about, like your game, for instance, your Coma game, if you had, any kind of little DLC thing that could easily just benefit Children's Hospital or something like that. I think it opens opportunities for different press to pick up your product
Wow.
for people who don't even know about your game
Yeah.
to learn about it because they're looking for charity stuff.
Yeah, you know the sad thing is like I'm completely willing to admit my selfishness here and just say that makes me want to do it, right? Like and I'm just wondering, have you had to use that kind of convincing with other developers? Like, hey, if you do this, it'll actually increase your sales.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's selfish. I think it's just humanity. Like I think people are willing to help,
Yeah.
but they need to be handed the shovel and they'll help you dig. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think people I think the expecting people to use their own time and energy and effort to figure out ways of doing things
Hmm.
that are beneficial to other people is just it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to
Huh.
be that effort for other people, so it's easy for them to execute on something.
So is how does Gamers for Good, this is kind of a weird question, but how do you guys perhaps keep the lights on if someone like me offers a DLC and says I'll give X amount of dollars to some charity? Would it be that I'll give X amount of dollars to Gamers for Good? Is that something that I could do?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Gamers for
Awesome.
Good is a charity.
Yeah. Okay.
We're
So
a
like,
we're a nonprofit organization, and any donations to us are 100% tax deductible. So yeah,
wow,
we're the same as any other
sweet.
nonprofit charity org.
You know, I'm
So
thinking about indie developers who are listening to this and who are probably going to release a game. I just wonder if it'd be smart for them to just from a profitability standpoint, and also it helps the world, right? It's like twofold. It's good for your game, but
yeah,
it's
it's
also good for the
twofold.
world. To consider doing something like that, because the truth is that every single indie is fighting for their lives for the spotlight, right?
Hmm.
And if you want to get the spotlight, maybe a good option is to say, hey, we're going to give X amount of dollars to Gamers for Good, and Gamers for Good will in turn provide X, Y, and Z to their community. I think that's a great way, and honestly, it's almost like a light bulb is going off in my head right now about ways that indies can start, sticking out in the crowd. Because when you launch on Steam, when you launch an indie game on Steam, you're probably going to drown in that ocean. You're not going to be able to get the spotlight you thought you would. Like in 2015, maybe.
Hmm.
You'd probably do great in 2015, but not anymore. It's really tough out there. So I think,
It's super tough. It's
yeah.
super tough. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, we actually did a test for this. So we put our first game, Cat Burglar, came out. We put it out on Steam with zero marketing, none. Like we didn't. We had no press on anything. Nobody talking about the game. So we put it out, and it's a free game. It's on Steam, and we have about 65,000 players.
Wow.
Um, in the first couple months. It's been out for almost 3 months,
That's
and
awesome.
a lot of it is just we have there's 200 something YouTube videos of people just playing it and talking about, oh, there's this great charity thing, and we have people, and it's a game that has a pet charity campaign built into it.
Yeah.
Um, and there's just people who are just about charity stuff that pick it up and find it somehow. I don't even know how they're finding it. And and we still have people playing. We have hundreds of new players every day.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's weird.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is people are looking for this type of content. So it is beneficial to look into
Yeah.
if you want a way to separate from the crowd.
Well, I've said this already, but like I do feel like this sense of guilt that suddenly I'm excited now. You know, that.
You shouldn't feel guilty.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
and that's kind of what
it's
I
great.
want. That's kind of what I want to tell my listeners is like, don't feel bad if you do feel this way, because, you there's that one question that haunts a lot of indie developers at night, and that is, how do I get exposure? And
Hmm.
if you can help the world and get exposure at the same time,
Yeah,
go
there's
for
nothing
it.
there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if I mean, feeling guilty about something is probably a good thing, because I think we should all feel a little guilty about, how the world is right now. People
Yeah,
people are the percentage of people who are doing things to help other people is surprisingly small right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
So like if guilt helps push you to make that little bit of effort to show other people that this is a
yeah.
thing, I think it's probably a good thing.
Man, this has been a great conversation, dude. Like, especially this ending. I love hearing about what you're doing and Gamers for Good. As we wrap this up, is there? I'll put a link in the description of this video, and also the podcast. But is there a place that people can reach out? Like, if you want maybe indie developers, or are you looking for a certain kind of indie developer or indie game or something for people to help out?
I'm looking for someone to help build some tools. I need a programmer right now to
Okay,
build a couple tools for me.
okay. Are you looking for
uh,
any sort of games or anything like that, or
no, I mean we have a lot of different things we're going to be doing.
okay,
We're meeting new people, looking to collaborate with people.
cool,
So yeah, just we're easy to reach. We have a website, gamersforgood.com,
great,
or gamersforgood.org. They both go to the same place. We have a Twitch channel. We stream a few times a week on the Gamers for Good Twitch channel.
okay.
Um, and yeah, I mean we're easy to get a hold of
Sweet.
if you wanna find us.
Sweet. Well, Pete, dude, thanks for your time. The remaining part of this video is on Patreon. So we're gonna do three. I mean, did you bring three tips with you, or three?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, I
great.
did.
So we're gonna do three tips regarding the indie game industry that you can listen to if you become a patron. So my patron link is in the description. But dude, thank you so much for your time. This has been really cool. I'm honestly like, there's so much that was covered in this video, and I think it's going to be really helpful. So thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, man. Thanks, guys. Feel free to subscribe or comment, and I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. Thanks.